The gunshot echoed across the valley before Lillian even saw the man she'd married smile. She wasn't supposed to be here, wasn't supposed to marry a stranger, wasn't supposed to face down armed men in the middle of nowhere. But when Mason Cole's rough hand grabbed hers that first night, pulling her behind cover as bullets tore through their cabin walls, she understood something terrifying. She'd traded one kind of danger for another, and this time there was no train home. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The train lurched to a stop with a screech that set Lillian's teeth on edge. She'd been listening to that sound for 3 days straight, metal grinding against metal, the whole world shaking like it wanted to throw her off. Through the smudged window, Cedar Ridge looked exactly like the previous 5 towns, dusty, small, and drowning in sunlight so bright it hurt. She didn't move. Not yet. Other passengers pushed past, eager to stretch legs or grab luggage, or just escape the smell of too many bodies in too little space. Lillian sat still, hands folded in her lap, feeling the letter in her pocket like a lead weight. Seeking practical woman for ranch work. Must be strong, willing, uncomplaining, romance not expected. Those words had seemed honest when she'd read them in Boston. Clean, straightforward. Everything the previous proposals weren't. No flowery promises about love or destiny or any of that garbage men wrote when they wanted something but didn't have the spine to say it plain. But now, staring at the empty platform through streaked glass, practical felt like another word for foolish. Miss, this is Cedar Ridge, Shaw. The conductor stood in the aisle, patient but firm. Lillian nodded, rose, smoothed her dress. It was brown, deliberately plain, deliberately forgettable. The kind of dress that said, "I won't cause trouble." She'd chosen it specifically for that message. The first step off the train nearly twisted her ankle. The platform wasn't level, and her boot caught on a warped board. She grabbed the railing, steadied herself, then looked up. He was waiting. Mason Cole stood 20 feet away, hat pulled low, arms crossed. Tall, taller than she'd expected. Broader, too, all shoulders and work-hardened muscle under a shirt that had seen better days. He didn't smile, didn't wave, just watched her with dark eyes that gave away nothing. She'd seen that look before. Men evaluated horses the same way. Lillian lifted her chin and walked toward him, carpet bag in hand. Her heart hammered, but she kept her expression neutral. She'd learned young that showing fear only made things worse. "Mr. Cole?" "Mason." His voice was rough, unused to conversation. He glanced at her bag, then back at her face. Something shifted in his expression, not quite disappointment, but close. "You're the one who answered my advertisement?" "Lillian Graves." She set the bag down. "I am." A pause stretched between them. Lillian watched him take her in properly now. The dark hair she'd pinned back severe and tight, the sharp angles of her face, the way she stood with weight balanced like she expected to need to move fast. She wasn't what he'd pictured. That much was obvious. "You're not what I—" He stopped himself, jaw tight. "The letter said you had experience with ranch work." "I do." "Where?" "My uncle's farm, outside Lawrence." The lie came smooth. She'd practiced it enough. Helped him for 6 years before he sold the property. Mason's eyes narrowed slightly, not quite believing, but not calling her out either. "Farming's different than ranching." "Work's work," Lillian said. "You need hands. I've got 2. That's what your letter said mattered." For the first time, something almost like amusement crossed his face. It disappeared fast. "You read the whole thing? About expectations?" "Romance not expected," Lillian repeated. "I read it. And you still came." She met his eyes steady. "I still came." Another pause. Mason looked past her at the train, already pulling away in a cloud of steam and cinders. When he looked back, his expression had hardened into something resolute. "Reverend's expecting us," he said, "unless you've changed your mind." Lillian thought about Boston, about the boarding house, about Mrs. Fletcher's son who'd cornered her in the hallway twice, hands grabbing, breath sour with whiskey. About the factory where the air was so thick with cotton dust that girls coughed blood into handkerchiefs. About the future that waited there. narrow and dark and suffocating. I haven't changed my mind. Mason nodded once. Then we should go. The Reverend's house sat at the edge of town, small and tidy with white paint peeling in the heat. Inside was cooler, but not by much. The Reverend himself was a thin man with kind eyes and hands that shook slightly when he opened his Bible. "Do you, Mason Cole, take this woman?" "Yes." The Reverend blinked. "I haven't finished. I know what I'm agreeing to," Mason said. His eyes stayed on Lillian. "Yes. And do you, Lillian Graves?" "Yes, Key," she said. The Reverend looked between them, mouth tight with disapproval at the rush, but he didn't argue. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. No kiss, no celebration." Mason signed the certificate with short, efficient movements, then handed Lillian the pen. Her hand didn't shake when she wrote her new name. Outside, the sun had shifted. Mason led her to a wagon hitched to two horses that looked as tired as Lillian felt. He took her bag, tossed it in the back without ceremony. "It's 2 hours to the ranch," he said. "We should leave while there's light." Lillian climbed up without help. The seat was hard wood, no cushion. Mason settled beside her, took the reins, and clicked his tongue. The horses moved. Cedar Ridge fell away behind them. They rode in silence for the first hour. The landscape stretched out in every direction, rolling hills covered in dry grass, clusters of trees that looked half dead from drought. Sky so big it felt oppressive. Lillian had never seen so much emptiness. In Boston, there was always something: buildings, people, noise. Here, there was just space and heat and the creak of wagon wheels. "Not much to look at," Mason said finally. Lillian glanced at him. "It's different. That's polite for ugly." "I didn't say that." "Didn't have to." He shifted the reins. "Most women take one look and decide they made a mistake. Most women aren't me." Mason's jaw tightened. "No, I'm starting to see that." Another mile passed. Lillian watched the horizon, trying to imagine living here, working here. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time. "The ranch," she said. "How big?" 300 acres. Used to be 5, but I sold parcels when my father died. Paid off debts." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "Got about 60 head of cattle, some chickens, a few horses." "Just you running it?" "Was just me. Now it's both of us." He didn't look at her. "That's why I sent the advertisement." Lillian understood what he wasn't saying. He needed help. Not a wife, not a partner, just labor he could trust not to quit or steal or cause trouble. "What happened to your father?" she asked. Mason's hands tightened on the reins. Heart gave out 3 years back. "And your mother?" "Died when I was 12, fever. No siblings then, no family left at all." Lillian knew that particular kind of loneliness, the kind that settled in your bones and stayed. "What about you?" Mason asked, not looking at her, but the question was there. "Family?" "None living." Also true. Also easier than explaining. "So we're both alone." "We're alone," Lillian corrected. "Not anymore." Mason finally turned his head, studied her profile. "You always this direct?" "You prefer I lie?" "I prefer knowing what I'm dealing with." Lillian met his eyes. "Then here's direct. I came because I needed to leave. You advertised because you needed help. Neither of us is here for love or romance or whatever stories people tell themselves. But I don't quit, I don't complain, and I don't break promises. You give me fair treatment, I'll give you honest work. That's the deal." Something shifted in Mason's expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He nodded slowly. "That's the deal." The sun was low when the ranch finally came into view. It wasn't much. A house that needed paint, a barn that leaned slightly to one side, fencing that was half-mended at best. But it was solid, real, more than Lillian had owned in her entire life. Mason pulled the wagon to a stop near the porch. "Not fancy," he said. "I didn't expect fancy." He climbed down, grabbed her bag. Lillian followed, boots hitting dirt that was hard-packed and dusty. The air smelled different here. Less smoke, more earth, and animal, and space. Inside, the house was sparse. One main room with a table, chairs, a stove. Two doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. Everything clean but worn, used hard and maintained just enough to function. Your room's there. Mason pointed to the left door. Mine's the other. Kitchen's obvious. Well's out back. He set her bag down. I'll show you the rest tomorrow. Lillian nodded. She'd expected him to say more, set rules, explain expectations, but he just stood there, awkward and uncertain in his own house. Thank you, she said. For what? For being honest, in the letter. And now. She looked around the room. A lot of men wouldn't be. Mason's expression softened just slightly. A lot of women would have run by now. I told you, I'm not most women. No, he said quietly. You're not. That first night, Lillian barely slept. The bed was harder than she was used to, and every sound felt amplified, wind rattling the windows, animals moving outside, the house settling around her. She lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell she'd gotten herself into. In the other room, she heard Mason moving, not sleeping either. Two strangers under one roof, bound by law and necessity and nothing else. This was her life now. She'd better make it work. Morning came early. Lillian woke to gray light and the sound of Mason already moving in the kitchen. She dressed fast, practical clothes she'd brought specifically for this. Trousers and a shirt that wouldn't get caught on machinery or fencing. She'd cut her hair shorter last night with the scissors from her bag. Easier to manage. When she stepped out, Mason was at the stove, cooking something that smelled like bacon and coffee. He glanced at her, did a double take at the short hair, but didn't comment. You cut it, he said instead. Easier for work. He nodded, turned back to the stove. Hungry? Yes. They ate in silence. The food was simple but good. Mason knew how to cook, at least enough to survive. Lillian filed that away. One less thing to worry about. Today I'll show you the ranch, Mason said, pushing his plate away. What needs doing? How things run. You watch, you ask questions, you learn. Tomorrow you start helping. Sound fair? Sounds fair. They spent the morning walking the property. Mason pointed out fencing that needed repair, explained the rotation he used for cattle, showed her where the stream ran, the only reliable water source for miles. He didn't talk much beyond the basics, but Lillian listened hard, memorizing details. The cattle were scattered across the hills, lean but healthy. Mason explained the market, the prices, the constant battle to keep animals fed when grass was scarce and water scarcer. It was a harder life than farming, more unpredictable, more dependent on things outside human control. Neighbors? Lillian asked as they walked back toward the barn. Few ranches east of here. We help each other sometimes. Roundups, brandings. Mason's expression darkened. But there's trouble too. What kind? He stopped, looked at her seriously. Man named Victor Hale owns most of the land around here, controls the main water source, the river that feeds everyone's streams. He's been buying up properties, forcing people out. Wants to own the whole valley. Can he do that? Not legally, but he's got men, guns, and sheriffs don't care much about land disputes out here. Mason's jaw was tight. He's made offers on this place twice. I refused both times. What did he say? That I'd regret it? Mason met her eyes. I'm telling you this because you need to know. It's not safe here. Might never be. If you want to leave... I don't. Lillian's voice was firm. You said you needed help. I'm here to help. Mason studied her for a long moment. Even if it gets dangerous? Especially then. Something in his expression shifted, walls coming down just slightly. You really mean that? I really mean that. He nodded, then turned and kept walking. Lillian followed, aware that something had changed between them. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The second day she worked. Mason handed her gloves and showed her how to mend fence, stretching wire, hammering posts, keeping tension even. Her hands cramped. Splinters dug into her palms despite the gloves. Sweat soaked through her shirt. She didn't complain. By midday, her section was done. Not perfect, but solid. Mason walked the line, testing it, then looked at her with something like approval. Good work. 2 words, but they mattered. The 3rd day, he taught her to ride properly. Lillian had been on horses before, but not like this, not working horses that needed firm hands and clear commands. She fell twice, got back up both times. By evening, she could manage a trot without bouncing like a sack of grain. You learn fast, Mason said. I have to. He didn't argue. The 4th day, they moved cattle. This was harder. Reading the animals, predicting their movements, working in tandem with Mason to guide them where they needed to go. Lillian made mistakes, let a cow break from the group, pushed too hard and scattered 3 more. But she kept going, adjusted, learned. By the end of the day, they'd successfully moved the herd to fresh grazing. Mason pulled his horse alongside hers, both of them tired and dusty. You did good today, he said. I messed up 6 times. And you fixed it. That's what matters. He glanced at her. Most people would have quit by now. I'm not most people, Lillian reminded him. Mason almost smiled. No, you keep saying that. They rode back in comfortable silence. Lillian realized with some surprise that she didn't hate this. The work was brutal, the conditions harsh, but there was something honest about it. No lies, no games, just effort and results. That night, they sat on the porch after dinner watching the sunset. Mason had brought out coffee, strong and bitter. Lillian sipped it, felt the heat spread through her chest. Can I ask you something? Mason said. Yes. Why'd you really leave Boston? Lillian considered lying, considered keeping that wall up. But something about the evening, the quiet, the exhaustion, the strange intimacy of 2 people who'd worked hard together made her tell the truth. There was a man, she said, son of the woman who owned the boarding house where I lived. He thought because I had no family, no money, no options, he thought that meant I had no right to say no. Mason's hand tightened on his cup. Did he? He tried. Lillian's voice was steady. I broke his nose and 2 fingers. Then I left before he could have me arrested for assault. A long silence. Then Mason said quietly, Good. Lillian looked at him, surprised. Breaking his nose, Mason clarified. Should have done worse. I would have, Lillian said, if I'd had more time. Mason's expression was serious. You won't have to worry about that here. I don't care what your past is. You're my wife now. That means you're under my protection. Anyone tries something, anyone, they answer to me. It wasn't romance. It wasn't a declaration of love. But it was something solid, something Lillian could hold on to. Thank you, she said. Don't thank me for basic decency. They sat in silence a while longer. Then Mason said, I should tell you something too, about why I really sent that advertisement. Lillian waited. I told you my father died 3 years back. Heart attack. But I didn't tell you. He paused, struggling. I didn't tell you I was there when it happened. We were fixing the barn roof. He just stopped, grabbed his chest. I tried to help, tried to get him down, but he was already gone. I'm sorry, Lillian said quietly. After that, I couldn't. Mason's voice caught. I couldn't manage it all alone. The ranch was falling apart. I was falling apart. I needed help, but I couldn't handle someone who'd expect things from me. Emotions, conversation, all of it. He looked at her. I just needed someone who'd work and not ask for more than I could give. Lillian understood. And now? Now I'm thinking maybe I was wrong, Mason said, about what I needed. Their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them. Not love, not yet, but recognition. 2 damaged people finding unexpected steadiness in each other. We should sleep, Mason said, standing. Early start tomorrow. Always is, Lillian agreed. But as she lay in bed that night, she felt something shift inside her. This place, this life, this man, none of it was what she'd expected. It was harder, rawer, more honest, and somehow that made it better. The following week passed in a rhythm. Wake before dawn, work until dusk, eat together, sleep hard. Lillian's body adapted, muscles strengthening, calluses forming, stamina building. She learned to read weather, to spot sick cattle, to predict when horses would spook. And she learned to read Mason. He was quieter than most men she'd known, but not cold. Just careful with words, like he'd learned they could hurt if used wrong. He noticed things. When she was tired, when her hands were raw, when she pushed too hard. He didn't coddle her, but he adjusted. Took on heavier work, showed her easier methods. They were becoming partners, real ones. Then Victor Hale arrived. It was midday, and Lillian was in the barn cleaning tack when she heard horses. Multiple riders. She stepped outside, squinting against the sun. 6 men on horseback. The one in front was older, well-dressed for the frontier, clean shirt, expensive hat, gun belt that looked more decorative than functional. But the men behind him were different. Hard faces, hands near weapons. Mason came out of the house, wiping his hands on a rag. His whole body had gone tense. "Hale," he said flatly. "Mason." The well-dressed man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Heard you got yourself a wife. Thought I'd come welcome her properly." His gaze slid to Lillian. She felt it like oil on skin, assessing, dismissive, proprietary. She met his eyes and didn't look away. "Mrs. Cole," Hale said. "Victor Hale. I own most of the land around here." He gestured broadly. "Welcome to the valley." "Thank you," Lillian said coldly. "Must be quite a change from city life. Boston, wasn't it?" His smile widened. "Oh yes, I make it my business to know about new arrivals, especially when they marry into properties I'm interested in." Mason stepped forward. "You've welcomed her. Now leave." "Now, Mason, is that any way to treat a neighbor?" Hale's voice stayed pleasant, but his men shifted in their saddles. "I actually came with another offer. Fair one, too. Double what I proposed last time. You could take your new bride somewhere civilized. Start fresh." "Not interested." "You sure? Things can get difficult out here. Accidents happen. Cattle wander off. Wells dry up." Hale's eyes flicked to Lillian again. A man with a wife has more to worry about now. More to lose. The threat was barely veiled. Lillian felt anger flash through her, hot and sharp. But Mason spoke first, voice low and dangerous. "Get off my land." Hale held up his hands in mock surrender. "Just making conversation, friend. But think about my offer. Won't stay on the table forever." He tipped his hat to Lillian. "Ma'am, hope to see you around." He turned his horse and rode off, his men following. But one of them looked back at Lillian, eyes crawling over her in a way that made her skin prickle. Mason stood rigid until they were out of sight. Then he turned to Lillian. "That's the trouble I mentioned," he said. Lillian's mind was racing. "He threatened us." "He threatens everyone. It's how he works." Mason's fists were clenched. "But he usually doesn't come himself, sends his men." "So why now?" "You," Mason said bluntly. "He wanted to see what kind of woman I married. See if you'd be easy to scare." Lillian felt cold settle in her stomach. And I think he's going to be disappointed." Mason looked at her seriously. "But that makes you a target too now. I'm sorry. I should have—" "Don't!" Lillian interrupted. "Don't apologize for something that's not your fault." She took a breath, steadying herself. "What do we do?" Mason's expression shifted, surprise, then something like pride. "We keep working. We watch our backs, and we don't give him an inch. And if he comes back, then we deal with it." Mason's eyes were hard. Together. That night, Lillian couldn't sleep. She kept seeing Hale's smile, kept feeling the weight of those threats. She'd thought leaving Boston meant leaving danger behind, but she'd just traded one kind for another. Around midnight, she gave up and went to the kitchen for water. Mason was already there, sitting at the table in the dark. "Can't sleep either?" she asked. "Never can after he visits." Mason's voice was tired. "Always wondering when he'll make his move." Lillian sat across from him. "Has he ever actually done anything?" beyond threats? Burned out the Hendersons 2 years back. They had proof it was his men, but the sheriff said there wasn't enough evidence. They sold to him for pennies and left. Mason's jaw was tight. The Clarks lost half their herd to rustlers, Hale's men, everyone knew it. But again, no proof. They're barely hanging on now. Why doesn't anyone fight back? Some have tried, ended up dead or disappeared. Mason looked at her. Hale's smart. He never leaves evidence, never does his own dirty work, and he's got enough money to buy off anyone official who might care. Lillian felt anger building. So he just wins? Everyone just accepts it? What choice do we have? He's got 20 men at least, more money than we'll see in our lifetimes, and he's patient. He'll wait us out, pick us off one by one until no one's left to oppose him. That's not... Lillian stopped, frustrated. There has to be something. Mason's expression was bleak. If there is, I haven't found it. They sat in silence. Then Lillian said quietly, "Teach me to shoot." Mason blinked. What? If he's going to come after us, after me, I need to know how to defend myself. She met his eyes. Teach me. Lillian, you said we deal with things together, so let me be useful. Let me learn. Her voice was firm. I'm not going to be a liability. I refuse to be. Mason studied her for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Tomorrow, he said, after morning chores. I'll teach you. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might hate it. Lillian almost smiled. I might, but I'll learn anyway. Something in Mason's expression softened. Yeah, he said quietly. You will. The morning sun wasn't even fully up when Mason handed Lillian the rifle. It was heavier than she expected, solid metal and worn wood that had seen years of use. Her hands trembled slightly as she took it, and she hated herself for the tremor. Don't be afraid of it, Mason said. He stood behind her, adjusting her stance. His hands were rough but careful, positioning her shoulders, her feet. It's a tool, same as a hammer or a plow. Respect it, but don't fear it. Lillian nodded, trying to feel the weight differently. A tool, not a weapon, not death. Stock against your shoulder, firm. It's going to kick back when you fire. If you're loose, it'll bruise. Mason tapped her elbow. Up higher. Line the sight with your target. She raised the rifle, squinting down the barrel at the fence post 50 yards out. Her arms already ached from holding the weight. Breathe, Mason said quietly. Steady breath. Then between heartbeats you squeeze. Don't pull. Squeeze. Lillian breathed. In, out. Felt her pulse in her throat. Squeezed. The explosion was everything at once. Sound that rattled her skull. Recoil that slammed her shoulder. Smoke that stung her eyes. She stumbled back, ears ringing. The fence post stood untouched. Again, Mason said. They spent 2 hours out there. Lillian's shoulder turned purple. Her hands blistered. She hit the post exactly 3 times out of maybe 40 shots, and 2 of those were luck more than skill. But she didn't quit. Enough for today, Mason finally said. You're jerking the trigger. Tomorrow we'll work on that. Lillian lowered the rifle, arms shaking. I'm terrible at this. You're learning. There's a difference. He took the rifle, began cleaning it with practiced movements. Most people can't even hold steady their first day. You got 3 hits. 3 out of 40. 3 more than 0. Mason glanced at her. You'll get better. Just takes time. Time was something Lillian wasn't sure they had, but she nodded, rolled her aching shoulder, and followed him back toward the house. The work didn't stop for target practice. There were still fences to mend, cattle to check, 1,000 tasks that needed doing before the sun set each day. Lillian pushed through the exhaustion, through the pain in her shoulder, through the frustration of being mediocre at something that might save her life. 3 days later, she hit the post 8 times out of 20. Progress felt like crawling through mud, slow, exhausting, but real. Mason started leaving the rifle within reach, in the barn, by the door. Never said anything about it, but the message was clear. Be ready. A week after Hale's visit, their nearest neighbor rode up. Thomas Garrett was older, weathered, with kind eyes and a limp from some old injury. He tipped his hat to Lillian, shook Mason's hand. "Heard Hale paid you a visit," he said without preamble. "News travels," Mason said dryly. "Always does." Thomas shifted in his saddle, glanced at Lillian, then back to Mason. "He's been making rounds. Hit the Walkers yesterday, the Pratts before that. Same song. Buy low or face consequences." "Anyone selling?" "Not yet. But people are scared, Mason. Real scared." Thomas's expression was grim. "Pratt lost 3 steers last night. Just vanished. Tracks led north, right toward Hale's property line." Mason's jaw tightened. "Sheriff do anything?" "You know he won't. Hale's got him in his pocket, same as everyone else with a badge in this county." Thomas looked at Lillian. "Ma'am, I don't mean to frighten you, but you should know what you're dealing with here." "I know," Lillian said quietly. "Mason told me." "Good, because it's going to get worse before it gets better." Thomas turned back to Mason. "Some of us are talking about banding together, watching each other's property, safety in numbers, maybe." "Maybe," Mason agreed. "When?" "Tomorrow night. My place. There's just the nearby ranchers, people we trust." Thomas nodded to Lillian. "Your wife's welcome too, if she wants to come." Lillian felt surprise flicker through her. Most men wouldn't include a woman in such discussions. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me yet. Might be we're just planning our own funerals." But Thomas smiled slightly. "Still, better to go down fighting than on our knees." After he left, Lillian turned to Mason. "Will it work? Banding together?" "Depends how committed people are, and how hard Hale pushes." Mason stared out at the horizon. "But Thomas is right about one thing. We can't survive this alone." That night, Lillian practiced loading the rifle until she could do it in the dark. Muscle memory, Mason called it. Make it so natural you don't have to think, just act. Her hands learned the rhythm. Slide the bolt, insert the round, close, aim, breathe, fire. She still wasn't good, but she was getting less terrible. The next evening, they rode to Thomas Garrett's ranch. 6 other families had gathered, weathered men and a few hard-eyed women who looked like they'd seen their share of trouble. They studied Lillian with cautious curiosity as she dismounted. "This is my wife, Lillian," Mason said simply. Nods. A few murmured greetings. One woman, maybe 40, with gray threading through dark hair, stepped forward. "Sarah Pratt," she said, offering her hand. "Welcome to the valley. Sorry it's under these circumstances." Lillian shook it. "Thank you." Inside, they gathered around Thomas's table. The conversation was blunt, no dancing around the reality. Hale was squeezing them. Stolen cattle, burned pastures, poisoned wells, nothing provable, everything deliberate. "We can't keep living like this," one rancher said. His name was Dutch, and he had a scar across his cheek. "Waiting for the next attack. Losing stock we can't afford to lose." "So what do you suggest?" another asked. "We ride up to Hale's place and start a war? He's got 20 guns. We've got, what, maybe 15 between all of us?" "15's enough if we're smart about it." "15's enough to get us all killed." The argument escalated. Voices rose. Lillian watched, trying to understand the dynamics, the history between these people. "Maybe we're thinking about this wrong," she said. The room went quiet. Eyes turned to her. Mason looked surprised but didn't interrupt. Lillian felt heat rise in her cheeks, but pushed through. "You're focused on fighting, but Hale doesn't want to fight. He wants your land. Fighting just gives him an excuse to wipe you out and call it self-defense." "So what then?" Dutch asked, not hostile but skeptical. "We just roll over?" "No, we make it cost him more than it's worth." Lillian looked around the table. "He steals cattle. We track them. We document everything. Build a case so airtight, even a bought sheriff can't ignore it." "Been tried," Thomas said gently. "Evidence disappears. Witnesses get scared. Then we don't rely on local law. We go higher." Lillian's mind was racing now, piecing together what she'd learned back east. Territorial governor, federal marshals, someone who doesn't answer to Hale. "That takes time," Sarah said. And money for lawyers. So we buy time, we pool resources, watch each other's property, make it hard for him to pick us off one by one. Lillian met Mason's eyes, and we make noise. Newspapers, anyone who will listen. Hale's power comes from operating in shadows. We drag him into light. Silence settled over the room. Then Dutch laughed, short and sharp. She's got fire, Mason. I'll give you that. She's got sense, Thomas said thoughtfully. Might work, might not. But it's better than sitting here waiting to die. The conversation shifted. Plans formed. Rough, uncertain, but real. They'd take shifts watching each other's land, document every incident, pool money for a lawyer willing to take the case to Santa Fe if needed. It wasn't much, but it was something. As they rode home under stars so bright they hurt, Mason said quietly, "That was smart. What you said back there, it might not work. Might not. But you got them thinking different. That's worth something." He glanced at her. "Where'd you learn that stuff about governors and marshals?" Lillian hesitated. "I read a lot. Back in Boston, the boarding house had old newspapers. I'd read them when I couldn't sleep." Not quite a lie. Not quite the truth either. Mason nodded, didn't push. "Well, you made an impression. Good or bad?" "Jury's still out," Mason said, but there was warmth in his voice. "But I'm leaning toward good." The next week passed in tense routine. Nothing happened. No stolen cattle, no burned buildings. The quiet felt wrong, like the pause before a storm breaks. Lillian kept practicing. Her aim improved. Not expert, but functional. She could hit a man-sized target at 50 yards 3 times out of 5 now. Mason said that was good enough. "Most fights happen close anyway," he explained. "And if you're shooting, something's already gone very wrong." The thought didn't comfort her. They were mending fence on the north property when they found the first carcass. A steer, 2 days dead, bullet hole in its skull. Clean shot. Professional. Mason's face went stone. Hale's sending a message. Why kill it and leave it? Why not steal it? Because this isn't about money. It's about fear. Mason knelt, examined the wound. Wants us to know he can get to our herd whenever he wants. Lillian felt cold anger settle in her gut. What do we do? Document it. Like you said. Mason stood, jaw tight. Then we bury it and keep working. They found 2 more over the next week. Same method, same message. At the next meeting at Thomas's place, others reported similar losses. The mood was grim. Some were talking about selling, cutting their losses. "That's what he wants," Lillian said. Frustration made her voice sharp. "He's trying to break you. Don't let him." "Easy to say when you've been here a month," Dutch shot back. "Some of us have put 30 years into these ranches." "Then don't throw it away now." Lillian met his eyes. "You think he'll stop with your land? He'll keep going until he owns everything, until everyone who wouldn't bend the knee is gone." "Girl's got a point," Sarah said quietly. "We sell now. We're just giving him what he wants." "I'm not saying sell," Dutch said. "I'm saying maybe fighting's the only language he understands." "Then we fight smart," Mason said. His voice carried weight. "Lillian's right. We document everything, we build the case, and we don't give him an excuse to escalate. And if he escalates anyway?" Mason's expression was hard. "Then we deal with it." The meeting ended with uneasy agreement. They'd hold out, keep watching, keep hoping the law would eventually care. But everyone knew hope was thin currency out here. Riding home, Mason was quiet. Lillian could feel tension radiating off him. "You're worried," she said. "I'm realistic." Mason's hands were tight on the reins. Hale's going to push harder, and when he does, people are going to break. Not all of them. Enough of them. He looked at her. "You should know, if this goes bad, really bad, I've got money set aside. Hidden. Enough for a train ticket east. You could leave." Lillian felt something fierce rise in her chest. "I'm not leaving." "Lillian, I'm not leaving," she repeated, harder. "I came here. I married you. I made a choice. I don't run." Mason studied her face in the moonlight. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "Okay. Okay. Okay. You stay." His voice was rough. "But if it comes to it, if I tell you to run, you run. Understand?" Lillian wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped her. "I understand." They rode the rest of the way in silence. 2 nights later, Lillian woke to the smell of smoke. She was out of bed before conscious thought, grabbing the rifle Mason had started keeping in her room. In the main room, Mason was already at the window, rifle in hand. "Barn," he said tersely. "It's on fire." Lillian's heart slammed against her ribs. She could see orange glow through the window, hear the crackle of flames. "The horses." "I know." Mason was already moving toward the door. "Stay here. Keep watch." "Mason, stay here." The command in his voice stopped her. "Someone set that fire. They might be waiting for me to run out there. I need you watching my back." He was right. Lillian hated it, but he was right. Mason slipped out into the darkness. Lillian positioned herself at the window, rifle ready, scanning the shadows. The fire was spreading fast. The barn was old, dry wood that caught like kindling. She saw Mason reach the barn doors, wrench them open. The horses came out in a panicked rush, 2 of them, terrified but alive. Mason guided them away from the flames, then turned back toward the barn. Movement caught Lillian's eye. Off to the left, near the tree line, a figure on horseback, watching. Her hands tightened on the rifle. She couldn't see details, too dark, too far, but the silhouette was there, watching Mason, watching the barn burn. Lillian raised the rifle, sighted through the window. Not to shoot, not yet, but to be ready. The figure sat motionless for another moment, then turned and melted back into the darkness. Mason salvaged what he could, tools, tack, a few supplies, but the barn itself was lost. By dawn, it was just smoking timbers and ash. They stood looking at the wreckage, both exhausted, both covered in soot. "They were watching," Lillian said. "In the trees, east side." Mason's expression was grim. "I figured. Did you see who?" "Too dark, but they sat there, watched you fight the fire, then left. Making sure I knew it was deliberate." Mason's fists clenched. "Bastards." Lillian had never heard him curse before. The anger in his voice was new, sharp, and barely controlled. "We need to tell the others," she said. "We will." Mason turned away from the ruins. "But first we need to figure out how we're going to survive without a barn." The next week was brutal. They rigged temporary shelter for the horses using canvas and fence posts, stored tools and supplies in the house, worked twice as hard to maintain routines that had been disrupted. Word spread. Thomas rode over, helped them build a makeshift structure. Sarah brought food. Dutch and 2 others showed up unannounced and spent a day helping shore up what they'd cobbled together. "Hale wants us isolated," Dutch said, hammering posts, picking us off one by one. "We don't let him." The solidarity helped, but it didn't change the reality. They were losing ground, losing resources, losing the war of attrition. At night, Lillian lay awake listening for sounds that didn't belong. Her rifle stayed within arm's reach. She'd become a light sleeper, nerves wound tight. Mason wasn't sleeping much either. She could hear him moving through the house at odd hours, checking locks, watching windows. One night she found him on the porch at midnight, just sitting in the darkness. "Can't sleep?" she asked. "Can you?" Lillian sat beside him. The night was cool, stars scattered overhead like broken glass. "Not really." They sat in silence. Then Mason said, "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For bringing you into this. You came here expecting hard work, not—" He gestured vaguely. "Not war. You didn't know it would get this bad." "I knew Hale was trouble. I should have—" Mason stopped, jaw working. "You should have had a choice, a real one. Not this." Lillian looked at him, really looked, saw the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the weight he carried in the set of his shoulders. He was trying to protect everyone, save everything, and it was crushing him. "Mason," she said quietly, "I had a choice. I made it, and I'd make it again." He turned to face her. "Even now? Even knowing? Even now?" Lillian meant it. Back in Boston, I had nothing. No future, no hope. Just survival, day after day after day. Here I have something worth fighting for. A burned barn and enemies at the gate? A partner, Lillian said. Someone who trusts me enough to hand me a rifle and put me at his back. That's worth more than you know. Mason's expression shifted, something raw and unguarded crossing his face. You really mean that? I really mean that. He reached out slowly, gave her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand covered hers. Rough skin, calluses, warmth. I'm glad you came, he said. Even with everything, I'm glad. Lillian's throat tightened. Me too. They sat like that, hands clasped, until the sky started to gray with approaching dawn. Then they went inside, together, to face whatever the new day would bring. The attacks continued. Not constant, but regular enough to keep everyone on edge. A poisoned water source at the Walker's place. Fence cut on the Pratt's property, letting cattle wander. Small things, expensive things. Hale was bleeding them slowly. The lawyer they'd pooled money to hire sent word back. He'd need evidence. Real evidence. Witnesses willing to testify. Proof that would hold up in territorial court. We've got dead cattle, Dutch said at the next meeting. Burned buildings. How much more proof do we need? Proof that ties it to Hale specifically, the lawyer's letter read. Not his men, not suspicions, him. Impossible, someone muttered. He never gets his hands dirty. Then we make him, Lillian said. All eyes turned to her. We set a trap. Make him think one of us is weak, ready to sell. Draw him out into the open. And then what? Sarah asked. Then we document everything, get witnesses, catch him in the act of threatening or bribing or whatever he does. That's dangerous, Thomas said. If he suspects a trap. It's all dangerous, Lillian interrupted. But sitting here waiting isn't working. We need to act. Mason was watching her with an unreadable expression. Who'd be the bait? Lillian met his eyes. We would. The room erupted. Too risky. Too many ways it could go wrong. Mason would never agree. I'll think about it, Mason said quietly. The room went silent. Mason, you can't be serious, Dutch said. I said I'll think about it. Mason's voice was firm. We meet again in 3 days. I'll have an answer then. The ride home was tense. Lillian could feel Mason's anger simmering. You had no right, he said finally, volunteering us without talking to me first. I know. I'm sorry. Are you? He pulled the horse to a stop, turned to look at her. Or are you just sorry I'm angry? Lillian considered lying, decided against it. I'm sorry I didn't talk to you first, but I'm not sorry for the idea. It could work. It could get us killed. So could doing nothing. Lillian's hands tightened on the reins. Mason, we're losing. Slowly, but we're losing. At some point, we have to take a risk. Not with your life. The fierceness in his voice surprised her. Why not mine, but yours is fine? Because... Mason stopped, struggled with something. Because I brought you here. You're my responsibility. I'm not your responsibility, Lillian said. I'm your partner. You keep saying that, but you don't act like it. You make decisions for me, protect me like I'm fragile. I'm not. I know you're not. Then treat me like it. Lillian's voice was hard. Let me fight. Let me take risks. Let me be useful beyond just existing at your side. Mason stared at her. Then slowly he nodded. You're right. What? You're right. I have been... He exhaled hard. I've been trying to protect you, keep you separate from the worst of it, but that's not fair to you, and it's not smart tactically. So we do it? The trap? We talk about it. Really talk. Figure out if it can work without getting us both killed. Mason's expression was serious. But Lillian, if we do this, we do it together. No secrets, no holding back. Agreed? Agreed. They spent the next 2 days planning, really planning, not just the broad strokes, but the details. How to approach Hale. What to say. How to get him to implicate himself. Where to hide witnesses. It was risky. A dozen ways it could go wrong. But the more they talked it through, the more feasible it seemed. On the third day, they presented the plan to the others. Silence. Then Thomas nodded slowly. It could work. Could get them killed, Dutch countered. So could everything else we've tried, Sarah said. At least this is action. The vote was close, but it passed. They'd spring the trap in a week, give Hale time to hear rumors about Mason considering selling, let greed make him careless, and they'd pray it was enough. The rumors spread exactly as they'd planned. Mason made a show of riding into town, lingering at the general store longer than usual, letting slip to the shopkeeper that he was considering his options. That maybe the ranch was too much for two people. That Lillian wanted to go back east where life was easier. All lies. Carefully crafted lies designed to reach Hale's ears. It took 3 days. On the fourth morning, a rider came, not Hale himself, but one of his men. Clean-shaven, well-dressed, with eyes that tracked everything. Mr. Cole? Name's Bennett. I work for Mr. Hale. He'd like to extend an invitation for dinner. Tonight, if you're available. Mason made a show of hesitating. I don't know. He insists Mrs. Cole attend as well. Says he'd like to discuss opportunities that might interest you both. Lillian stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. She'd been listening from inside. What kind of opportunities? Bennett smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. The kind that could change your circumstances considerably. Mr. Hale is a generous man to those who work with him. We'll think about it, Mason said. Mr. Hale doesn't like to be kept waiting. Bennett's smile thinned. 6 o'clock. Don't be late. He rode off without waiting for confirmation. Inside, Mason closed the door and turned to Lillian. That was faster than I expected. He's eager. Lillian's stomach was tight. That's good, right? Eager men make mistakes, or eager men are setting their own trap. Mason moved to the window, watched Bennett's retreating figure. We need to be smart about this. They'd already planned for this possibility. Thomas and Dutch would position themselves near Hale's ranch before sunset, hidden with a clear view of the main house. Sarah would wait in town with the lawyer, ready to take statements the moment they returned. Everything had to be documented, witnessed, airtight. But standing there in the afternoon light, the reality of what they were about to do settled over Lillian like cold water. We don't have to do this, Mason said quietly. We can still back out. No, we can't. Lillian met his eyes. If we back out now, he'll know something's wrong. He'll come at us harder. I know, but I'm saying, if you want to stop, we stop. Your safety matters more than any plan. Lillian crossed to him, placed her hand over his where it rested on the windowsill. My safety and yours. We're in this together, remember? Mason's fingers curled around hers. Together. They spent the afternoon preparing. Lillian changed into her better dress. Still plain, but cleaner, less work-worn. She pinned her short hair back as best she could. Mason shaved, put on a shirt that wasn't stained with dirt and sweat. They looked like people who might be desperate enough to sell. People who'd run out of options. The ride to Hale's ranch took 40 minutes. The sun was low, painting everything gold and red. Beautiful, if Lillian had been in a state to notice. Instead, her mind ran through the plan over and over. What to say, what not to say. How to get Hale talking without seeming too eager. Hale's ranch was bigger than she'd imagined. The main house was 2 stories, painted white, with a wraparound porch and glass windows that must have cost a fortune to transport. Outbuildings dotted the property. Bunkhouse, barns, stables. This wasn't just a ranch. It was an empire. A stable hand took their horse. Lillian forced herself to breathe normally as they climbed the porch steps. Before Mason could knock, the door opened. Hale stood there, smiling like they were old friends. Mason, Mrs. Cole, please, come in. The inside was even more impressive. Polished floors, real furniture, paintings on the walls. Lillian had seen wealth before. Boston had plenty of it. But out here, surrounded by dust and drought and desperation, it felt obscene. Quite a place you have, Mason said. Thank you. I believe in investing in quality. Hale gestured toward a dining room. Please sit. Dinner will be ready shortly. The table could have seated 12. They sat at one end, Hale at the head. A woman Lillian hadn't seen before brought out food: roast beef, potatoes, vegetables that must have come from somewhere far away. The kind of meal most ranchers saw maybe twice a year. "I appreciate you coming," Hale said, cutting into his meat. "I know we got off on the wrong foot during my last visit." "You threatened us," Lillian said flatly. Mason's boot pressed against hers under the table. A warning. But Hale just laughed. "Direct. I like that." He pointed his knife at her. "Your wife's got spine, Mason. That's rare out here." "She does," Mason agreed. His voice was carefully neutral. "Which is why I was surprised to hear you might be considering leaving." Hale's eyes moved between them. "After all that defiance, all that determination to hold on to your little piece of dirt, what changed?" This was it. The moment they'd rehearsed. Mason set down his fork. "Turns out defiance doesn't pay bills or rebuild barns. Ah yes, terrible tragedy, that fire." Hale's expression was sympathetic in a way that made Lillian's skin crawl. "Any idea how it started?" "I've got ideas, man," Mason said. "But no proof." Proof is difficult out here. Things happen. Accidents, misfortunes. The frontier's a dangerous place. Hale sipped his wine. "Which is why smart men know when to cut their losses." "Is that what you think I should do? Cut my losses?" "I think you should consider your options. You've got a wife now. Responsibilities." Hale's gaze slid to Lillian. "A woman like Mrs. Cole doesn't belong out here breaking her back on a failing ranch. She belongs somewhere civilized, somewhere safe." Lillian bit back her first response, forced herself to look down, to play the part of the intimidated wife who secretly wanted an easier life. "How much?" Mason asked. Hale smiled. "Finally, a practical question." He leaned back. "I offered you double market value before. That offer's expired, but I'm a fair man. I'll give you market value. Enough to start over somewhere else. That's half what the land's worth. The land's worth what someone's willing to pay. And right now, I'm the only buyer." Hale's smile didn't waver. "Unless you think you can outlast me, rebuild your barn, replace your stolen cattle, survive the next drought? What if I don't sell?" Mason's voice was hard. "What then?" "Then you struggle, you suffer, eventually you fail." Hale spread his hands. "It's inevitable, Mason. I own the water, I control the routes to market, I have the resources to wait you out. You don't." "That sounds like a threat." "It's reality." Hale's expression hardened. "I've been patient, I've been generous, but my patience has limits." "And if we still refuse?" Lillian asked. Her heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. Hale turned to her. Something cold moved behind his eyes. "Then accidents will continue to happen. Fires, stolen livestock, maybe worse, maybe someone gets hurt." He let that hang in the air. "Would be a shame if something happened to you, Mrs. Cole. Young woman like you, all alone on that ranch while your husband's out working." There it was, the threat, direct and unmistakable. Mason's hand clenched into a fist on the table. "You son of a—" "Careful," Hale said softly. "You're a guest in my home. Let's keep this civil." The tension was thick enough to choke on. Lillian reached under the table, found Mason's knee, pressed down. "A message. Stay calm. We need more." Mason took a breath. "Let's say I'm interested. What's the process?" Hale relaxed slightly. "Simple. You sign the deed over to me. I give you cash. You pack up and leave. Easy. And the others, the ranchers around us? What about them? They sell too?" Hale's smile was sharp. "Eventually, they're all in the same position as you, struggling, desperate, one bad season from ruin. They'll come around." "Because you'll make sure they have bad seasons," Mason said. "I'll make sure they understand reality." Hale finished his wine. "The strong survive out here, Mason. The weak get swallowed up. That's not cruelty. That's nature. By burning their barns, poisoning their wells, stealing their cattle." Lillian couldn't help herself. The words came out hot and angry. Hale looked at her for a long moment. Then he laughed. "You can't prove any of that. No one can. And even if you could, Who'd care? The sheriff? He knows which side his bread is buttered on. The territorial government? They've got bigger problems than some land disputes in the middle of nowhere. So you admit it, Mason said. You're behind everything. I admit nothing. But Hale's smile said otherwise. I'm simply explaining how things work, how they've always worked. The smart people adapt. The stubborn ones disappear. And if we go to the authorities anyway? Lillian pressed. Tell them everything? Then you'll be very disappointed when nothing happens. Hale stood, clearly done with the conversation. Think about my offer. You've got 3 days. After that, the price drops. And the accidents, well, they might get worse. Mason stood too, his whole body rigid with controlled rage. We'll think about it. Do that. Hale walked them to the door. Oh, and Mason, I know you've been talking with the other ranchers, planning something. Whatever it is, don't. You're outmatched, outgunned, and outsmarted. Accept that and move on. Spo ambi malsa. He knew. Somehow he knew about the meetings. Outside, they climbed onto their horse in silence. Lillian could feel eyes watching from the bunkhouse, from the shadows. They were letting them leave, for now. But the message was clear. Hale could reach them any time he wanted. They rode away at a measured pace, not too fast, not fleeing, just two people leaving after an unpleasant dinner. Once they were out of sight of the main house, Mason spoke through clenched teeth. He threatened you, directly. I know. I should go back there and nothing, Lillian interrupted. We got what we needed. He admitted everything. Thomas and Dutch heard it all. If they were close enough to hear. They found out 5 minutes later when Thomas and Dutch emerged from the tree line, both looking grim. We heard, Thomas said. Every word. Bastard didn't even try to hide it. Will it be enough? Mason asked. For the lawyer, maybe. For a judge who's not in Hale's pocket. Thomas shook his head. That's the real question. Dutch spat into the dirt. At least now we know what we're dealing with. He's not going to stop, not until he owns everything, or we're all dead. Then we make sure the lawyer gets this testimony tonight, Lillian said. Sarah's waiting in town. We ride there now. Tell her everything while it's fresh. They reached Cedar Ridge after dark. Sarah was in the boarding house, the lawyer with her. A thin man named Carlson who looked exhausted but focused. They told him everything, every threat, every admission. Thomas and Dutch corroborated from what they'd heard outside. Carlson took notes, asked questions, made them repeat certain parts. It's good, he said finally. Not perfect, but good. Problem is, it's your word against his, and he's got money for better lawyers. So what do we do? Mason asked. We file anyway. Get it on record. Meanwhile, I send word to the territorial marshal. If we can get federal law involved, Hale's local connections won't matter as much. Carlson looked at them seriously. But this will take time. Weeks, maybe months. Can you hold out that long? We'll have to, Lillian said. After Carlson left, they stood in the street, the four of them, exhausted and uncertain. Hale said he knows we've been meeting, Mason said. Someone's talking. Or he's guessing, Thomas countered, trying to make us paranoid. Either way, we need to be more careful. Dutch looked at Mason and Lillian. You two especially. He's focused on you now. They rode home in darkness, every shadow a potential threat. Lillian kept one hand near the rifle strapped to the saddle. Her earlier bravado had faded, replaced by the cold reality of what they'd done. They'd poked a bear. Now they had to survive the consequences. The next morning came too early. Mason was already up, checking the property, looking for signs of tampering. Lillian joined him, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. Everything looked normal, too normal. He's waiting, Mason said. 3 days, he said. He'll wait to see if we sell. And when we don't, then things get bad. They spent the day fortifying what they could, moving valuable tools into the house, setting up positions where they could watch approaches to the property. It felt like preparing for a siege, because that's exactly what it was. That night, they ate in silence. The tension was suffocating. I'm sorry, Mason said finally. Lillian looked up. For what? For getting you into this. For everything. He pushed food around his plate. You were right when you said you're my partner, but I keep treating you like something fragile, something I need to protect. I am something you need to protect, Lillian said. Just like you're something I need to protect. That's what partners do. Mason met her eyes. I'm scared, that's the truth. I'm scared he's going to hurt you to get to me. I'm scared too, Lillian admitted. But being scared doesn't mean we give up. No, it doesn't. Mason reached across the table, took her hand. When this is over, if we survive, I want to do this right, court you properly, build something real. Lillian felt her throat tighten. We're already building something real. Mason struggled with words. I want to tell you how I feel about you, but not while we're in the middle of this. Not while everything's desperate and unclear. Then tell me after, Lillian said softly. When we've won. When we've won, Mason agreed. They sat like that, hands clasped until the candle burned low. The next day was quiet. Too quiet. Lillian felt it like an itch between her shoulder blades, the sense of being watched, hunted. They worked anyway. Tended the cattle, mended what needed mending, refused to hide inside cowering. The second day, riders appeared on the ridge, 6 of them, just sitting there watching, not approaching, not threatening, just present. Psychological warfare, Mason said, making sure we know he's watching. Should we? No. We ignore them. Don't give them a reaction. But it was hard to ignore, hard to work with eyes boring into your back, hard to sleep knowing they might still be out there in the darkness. The third day arrived, deadline day. Mason and Lillian woke before dawn, both tense, both expecting something. But the morning passed without incident. Noon came and went. Afternoon stretched long and hot. Maybe he's bluffing, Lillian said. Maybe. But Mason didn't sound convinced. Evening fell. They were finishing dinner when they heard it, hoofbeats. Multiple horses, moving fast. Mason was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand. Lillian grabbed hers, positioned herself at the window. The riders came in hard, 8 of them, led by Bennett, Hale's man from before. They surrounded the house, hands near weapons but not drawn. Bennett dismounted. Mr. Cole, we need to talk. Mason stepped onto the porch, rifle held low but ready. Lillian stayed inside, watching through the window, heart hammering. Talk, Mason said. Mr. Hale is disappointed you haven't responded to his offer. He sent me to relay a message. I'm listening. Your cattle, the ones grazing in the north pasture. Bennett smiled. They're being moved as we speak, relocated to Mr. Hale's property. He considers it payment for the opportunity cost of your stubbornness. Rage flashed across Mason's face. You're stealing my herd? Relocating, Bennett corrected. And if you try to stop us, well, things might get violent. Mr. Hale would hate for anyone to get hurt. It was a setup, pure and simple. If Mason went after the cattle, they'd have an excuse to kill him. If he didn't, he'd lose everything. Lillian's mind raced. The cattle were north, at least 30 minutes away. By the time they got there, Hale's men would have them scattered or gone. Unless... She moved before thinking it through. Out the back door, quiet as she could, around the side of the house to where their horses were tied. Mason was still talking with Bennett, his voice hard and angry. Good. Keep them distracted. Lillian mounted, rifle across her lap, and kicked the horse into motion. North. Fast. She heard shouts behind her. They'd spotted her, but she didn't stop. Didn't look back. Just rode hard toward the north pasture, toward her herd, toward whatever waited there. The pasture came into view as the sun touched the horizon. She could see them, 4 riders driving the cattle toward the property line. 30 head, maybe more, being stolen right in front of her eyes. Lillian raised the rifle, fired a shot into the air. The riders turned. One of them laughed. Well, look at this. Little lady thinks she's going to stop us. Those are our cattle, Lillian called. Her voice shook but held firm. Leave them. Or what? You going to shoot us? There's 4 of us, sweetheart. 1 of you. Lillian aimed, not at the man, at the ground in front of his horse. Fired. The horse reared. The rider cursed, fought for control. Next shot's higher, Lillian said. Your choice. Another rider drew his gun. You stupid girl. Thunder erupted behind her. Lillian turned her head, Mason riding hard, rifle raised, and behind him, more riders. Thomas, Dutch, Sarah, half a dozen others. The rustlers saw them coming and made their calculation fast. 4 against 10 wasn't odds they liked. This ain't over, the lead rider spat. But they turned and rode, leaving the cattle milling and confused. Mason reached Lillian, his face pale. What the hell were you thinking? I was thinking they were stealing our cattle. Lillian's hands were shaking now, adrenaline fading. I was thinking we couldn't let them. You could have been killed. But I wasn't. She met his eyes. We weren't. Thomas rode up. They'll be back, probably with more men. Then we'll be ready, Dutch said. He looked at Lillian with something like respect. Girl's got guts. I'll give her that. Sarah brought her horse alongside Lillian's. That was incredibly stupid. I know. And incredibly brave. Sarah smiled slightly. Remind me never to underestimate you. They drove the cattle back toward safer ground, closer to the house where they could watch them. Everyone was on edge, expecting another attack. But night fell quiet. Too quiet. He's planning something bigger, Mason said. They were back at the house, the others positioned around the property as lookouts. This was just a test. To see how we'd respond, Lillian agreed. And now he knows we've got support, numbers. Mason paced. That changes his approach. How? He'll either back off, wait for us to let our guard down, or he'll come at us with everything, Lillian finished. Mason nodded grimly. They didn't have to wait long to find out which. Just before midnight, Dutch came running. Riders, 15, maybe 20, coming from the east. Everyone scrambled to positions. Mason shoved Lillian toward the house. Inside, now! No. Lillian, please. I can't fight if I'm worried about you. She wanted to argue, but the desperation in his eyes stopped her. Be careful. You too. She took position at the window, rifle ready, watching the darkness. She could hear them now. Hoofbeats, lots of them, getting closer. Then light bloomed in the distance. Torches. They came in fast, whooping and hollering, throwing torches toward the outbuildings. One landed on the makeshift barn they'd built. Another near the fence. Gunfire erupted. Mason and the others shooting to drive them back. The attackers returned fire, bullets punching through wood, shattering glass. Lillian fired through the window, aiming for horses, not men, trying to scatter them. Her shots went wild. Too dark, too chaotic. A rider broke from the pack, heading straight for the house. Lillian tracked him, breathed, squeezed. The horse screamed and went down. The rider rolled, came up running. Lillian lost sight of him, then heard the back door crash open. She spun, rifle up. The man was there, gun in hand, face twisted with rage. They fired simultaneously. Pain exploded in Lillian's shoulder. She fell back, hit the floor hard. Couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Through blurring vision, she saw the man stagger, hand pressed to his side. Her shot had hit. Not fatal, but enough. He raised his gun again. Then Mason was there, slamming into the man from the side. They went down in a tangle of fists and curses. Lillian tried to move, to help, but her left arm wouldn't work. Blood soaked her shirt. Mason got on top, hit the man once, twice, until he stopped moving. Then he turned to Lillian. No, 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 no. His hands were on her, pressing the wound. Lillian, stay with me. I'm okay. Her voice sounded far away. You're not okay, you're bleeding. Mason's face was pale, terrified. Sarah, I need help. Outside, the gunfire was fading. The attackers were pulling back, their torches extinguished, their surprise attack failing. Sarah ran in, took one look at Lillian, and started barking orders. Get clean cloth. Boil water. Move her to the table. Lillian felt herself being lifted, carried. Pain spiked white and blinding. She might have screamed. Bullet went through, Sarah said, examining the wound. That's good. Nothing vital hit, but she's losing blood. Fix it, Mason said desperately. Please. I'm trying. Hold her down. This is going to hurt. It did. It hurt like nothing Lillian had ever felt. She bit down on the leather strap Sarah gave her, felt hands holding her shoulders, her legs. felt pressure and fire as Sarah cleaned and packed the wound. Then darkness took her. When Lillian woke, the pain came first, sharp and insistent in her shoulder, radiating down her arm. Then came awareness of where she was. Her bed, morning light filtering through the window, the smell of coffee, and something medicinal. She tried to sit up. Her body refused. "Don't!" Mason's voice, rough from lack of sleep. He appeared beside the bed, face haggard. "Sarah said you need to stay still." "What?" Lillian's throat was dry. "What happened?" "You got shot. Don't you remember?" Mason helped her drink water, his hand shaking slightly. "You've been out for almost a day." It came back in fragments. The attack, the man in the house, gunfire, pain. Did they? We drove them off, captured 2 of them. Mason's jaw was tight. "One of them was the man who shot you. He didn't make it." Lillian processed that. She'd shot him. He'd died. She should feel something. Guilt, horror, something. But all she felt was tired. "The others?" she asked. "Thomas took a bullet in the leg. He'll be fine. Few others got scrapes and bruises. But we held them." Mason's hand found hers, gripped tight. "You could have died, Lillian. When I saw you on the floor, all that blood. But I didn't." She squeezed his hand back, felt the tremor in his fingers. "I'm here." Because Sarah knew what to do. Because the bullet went clean through. His voice cracked. "It was too close. Mason, I can't lose you." The words came out raw. "I know we agreed to wait until this was over, but I can't. I need you to know. I love you. Not because you're useful, or because you work hard, or because you're brave. I love you because you're you, because you make me want to be better, because when I think about the future, you're in every part of it." Lillian's chest tightened. "That's not fair." "What? You said you'd tell me when we won." "We haven't won yet." Mason almost laughed, the sound broken. "We're alive. That feels like winning." "Then I love you too," Lillian said. Simple. True. "I think I have for a while. I just didn't know how to say it." He leaned down, pressed his forehead to hers. They stayed like that, breathing together, alive together. Sarah came in an hour later, checked Lillian's wound with efficient hands. "Healing clean. You're lucky. Another few inches and we'd be having a very different conversation." "How long until I can move around?" Lillian asked. "Week, maybe 2. That shoulder needs time." Sarah fixed her with a stern look. "And I mean actual rest, not your version where you work through the pain." "I can't just lie here." "You will, or you'll tear something and make it worse." Sarah softened slightly. "Mason and the others can handle things. Let them." After Sarah left, Lillian stared at the ceiling, frustration building. She'd never been good at sitting still, never been good at letting others carry the weight. Mason brought her food, helped her eat when her left arm wouldn't cooperate. The intimacy of it, being fed, being cared for, felt strange, vulnerable. "Stop looking so miserable," Mason said. "You're alive. That's what matters." "I should be helping. There's work. There's always work. It'll keep." He set the bowl aside. "Right now, you heal. That's your job." Over the next few days, Lillian learned the full scope of what had happened during the attack. The 2 men they'd captured had talked, not willingly, but eventually, confirmed everything. Hale had ordered the raid, paid them to burn the buildings, scatter the cattle, kill anyone who resisted. Dutch had ridden to Cedar Ridge immediately, brought the sheriff and Carlson the lawyer. The testimony, combined with what they'd gathered from the dinner at Hale's ranch, was damning. "The territorial marshal is coming," Mason told her on the 3rd day. "Should be here within the week. Carlson sent everything, depositions, witness statements, the captured men's confessions. It's building into something Hale can't buy his way out of." "Will it be enough?" Lillian asked. "It has to be." But waiting was agony. Every day felt like holding your breath underwater, wondering if you'd make it to the surface. On the 5th day, Lillian convinced Mason to help her to the porch. Her shoulder screamed in protest, but she needed to see the sky, feel air that wasn't stale with sickness. They sat together in the afternoon sun. The property looked rough, Scorch marks where torches had landed, the makeshift barn damaged again, fencing broken in places. But it was still standing. "We need to rebuild," Lillian said. "Properly this time." "We will. After." Mason's arm was careful around her waist, supporting her. "After the marshal comes. After Hale's dealt with." "You really think they'll arrest him?" "I think we've given them enough rope to hang him with. Whether they use it," Mason shook his head. "That's out of our hands now." Thomas visited that evening, limping but mobile. His leg was bandaged, but he waved off concern. "Takes more than a bullet to slow me down." "How are the others?" Lillian asked, rattled, but holding together. Thomas sat heavily. "We've got people watching Hale's place. He hasn't left since the attack. Probably knows we've got the law coming." "Think he'll run?" Mason asked. "Men like Hale don't run. They fight." Thomas's expression was grim, which means this isn't over. But the days passed without incident. No attacks, no threats, just silence. The marshal arrived on a Tuesday, accompanied by 2 deputies. He was a hard-looking man named Cooper, with gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He spent 2 days interviewing everyone, the captured men, the ranchers, Mason, and Lillian. When it was Lillian's turn, he studied her bandaged shoulder with interest. "Heard you rode out alone to stop a dozen rustlers." "4," Lillian corrected, "and I didn't stop them. I delayed them. Still took guts." Cooper made notes. "Tell me everything about the dinner with Hale. Every word you remember." She did. Recited it all. The threats, the admissions, the casual way Hale had talked about destroying lives. Cooper's expression never changed, but he wrote everything down. "This man threatened you directly," he said when she finished. "Yes." "Said accidents might happen to you specifically." "Yes." Cooper nodded slowly. "That's good. Personal threats are harder to explain away. Combined with everything else, the testimony, the confessions, we've got a case." "Will it stick?" Lillian asked. "I'll make sure it does." Cooper's voice was iron. "I don't like men who think they're above the law. Hale's been operating in shadows too long. Time someone dragged him into the light." The next day, Cooper and his deputies rode to Hale's ranch. Mason wanted to go with them, but Cooper refused. "This is official business. You stay here." So they waited. The whole valley seemed to hold its breath. Cooper returned at sunset, face grim. He's under arrest, charged with conspiracy to commit arson, theft, assault, attempted murder. His men scattered the moment we showed up. Most of them wanted for other crimes anyway. "He'll get a trial?" Mason asked. "In Santa Fe, fair judge, good jury pool." Cooper looked at both of them. "You'll need to testify, both of you. Can you do that?" "Yes," Lillian said immediately. Cooper nodded. "Good. Because he's going to fight this. He's got money, lawyers, but we've got the truth, and that counts for something." After Cooper left, Mason pulled Lillian close, careful of her shoulder, and just held her. She felt the tension drain from his body, replaced by something like relief. "It's not over," he said. "Trial's still coming. But he's arrested. He's not free to hurt anyone else." Lillian looked up at him. "That's something. That's everything." Word spread fast. Within days, the whole valley knew Hale was in custody. People came by the ranch, neighbors they barely knew, ranchers from miles away, all wanting to shake their hands, to thank them. "You started this," one old rancher said. "Stood up when the rest of us were too scared. That matters." Lillian didn't feel heroic. She felt tired and sore and aware of how close they'd come to losing everything. But as the visitors kept coming, as people talked about rebuilding and moving forward and not being afraid anymore, she started to see it differently. They hadn't won alone. They'd shown others it was possible to fight back, and that had mattered. 2 weeks after her injury, Sarah declared her healed enough to work. Light work. Nothing that strains the shoulder, and if it starts bleeding again, you stop immediately. Lillian agreed to the terms. Just being able to move freely again felt like victory. She and Mason started rebuilding in earnest. The barn first, a real one this time, properly constructed. Thomas and Dutch helped, along with half a dozen others who showed up unannounced with tools and materials. "Consider it payment," Dutch said when Mason tried to refuse, "for what you did, what you both did." The work was slow but steady. Lillian couldn't do heavy lifting, but she could measure, hold things in place, make herself useful. And slowly, the ranch started to look less like a battlefield and more like a home. The trial date was set for 6 weeks out. Carlson visited regularly, preparing them for what to expect. Hale's lawyers are good. They'll try to discredit you, make it seem like you had ulterior motives. Stay calm, stick to the facts, don't let them provoke you. Mason was nervous about testifying. I'm not good with words. What if I mess up? You tell the truth, Lillian said. That's all you need to do. But she was nervous too. The thought of facing Hale again, of having to relive everything in front of strangers, made her stomach tight. A month after the arrest, a letter came. From Boston. From Mrs. Fletcher. Lillian stared at it for a long time before opening it. The letter was short, venomous. Mrs. Fletcher's son had told her everything, how Lillian had attacked him unprovoked, how she'd fled like a criminal. She wanted Lillian to know she'd informed the Boston police that there was a warrant for her arrest. Lillian's hands shook as she read it. Mason found her on the porch, the letter clutched in her fist. What's wrong? She handed it to him, watched his expression darken as he read. This is... He looked up at her. Is any of this true? About the attack? I told you what happened. He came after me. I defended myself. Then this is blackmail, trying to scare you. It's working, Lillian admitted. Her voice was small. What if they come for me? What if... Mason sat beside her, took her hands. Then we fight that too. We get a lawyer, we tell the truth, we prove what really happened. You don't know he'll believe me over him. He's wealthy, connected. I'm nobody. You're not nobody, you're my wife. You're the woman who stood up to Hale when everyone else was too scared. You're the bravest person I know. Mason's grip tightened. And I will not let them take you. Not for defending yourself, not for anything. Lillian felt tears threaten. She'd been holding so much in, the fear, the pain, the exhaustion. It all wanted to break free. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, me too. Mason pulled her close. But we face it together, like everything else. They showed the letter to Carlson the next day. He read it, frowned, set it aside. It's intimidation. Mrs. Fletcher has no legal standing here, and Boston police won't extradite over a boarding house dispute. But we should document this. Shows a pattern of you being targeted and threatened. Could it affect the trial? Lillian asked. Hale's lawyers might try to use it. Paint you as someone with a criminal past, make you seem unreliable. Carlson looked at her seriously. Which is why you need to be completely honest when you testify. Tell them about Boston, about what really happened. Don't give them ammunition to call you a liar. The thought of exposing everything, her past, her shame, in front of a courtroom made Lillian want to hide. But Carlson was right. The truth was her only weapon. As the trial date approached, the tension built again. Lillian slept poorly, woke from nightmares where Hale walked free and came for them with an army. Mason wasn't sleeping much better. They clung to each other in the darkness, found comfort in physical closeness. One night, after a particularly bad dream, Lillian woke shaking. Mason pulled her against him. What did you see? You were dead. He killed you, and I couldn't stop it. I'm here. I'm alive. His hands were warm on her back. We both are. What if the trial doesn't go our way? What if he gets acquitted? Then we deal with it. We leave if we have to. Start over somewhere else. Mason tilted her face up. But I don't think it'll come to that. We've got the truth on our side. Truth doesn't always win. No, but it's got a better chance than lies. 3 days before the trial, they rode to Santa Fe. The territorial capital was bigger than Cedar Ridge, more civilized, with actual streets and buildings that didn't look like they'd blow over in a strong wind. They stayed in a small hotel. Carlson met them there, went over their testimony one more time. Remember, stay calm, answer only what's asked, don't volunteer extra information. Hale's lawyers will try to rattle you. Don't let them. The first day of trial, the courtroom was packed. Ranchers from the valley, townspeople from Cedar Ridge, curious onlookers. And Hale, sitting at the defense table in an expensive suit, looking calm and unbothered. His eyes found Lillian's. He smiled. Her stomach turned. The prosecutor was a stern woman named Rodriguez, who laid out the case with precision. The charges, the evidence, the testimony they'd gathered. Hale's lawyers objected constantly, but the judge, an older man with sharp eyes, overruled most of them. The first witnesses were the captured men. They testified reluctantly, clearly terrified of Hale even in custody. But their stories matched. Hale had hired them, paid them, ordered the attacks. Hale's lawyers tore into them. "You're criminals, thieves, and arsonists. Why should anyone believe you?" "Because we did what he paid us to do," one of them said, "and he didn't care who got hurt." Thomas testified next, then Dutch, then Sarah, each of them recounting attacks, threats, losses, building a picture of systematic intimidation. When it was Mason's turn, Lillian watched him walk to the stand. He looked uncomfortable in clean clothes, out of place in the formal setting, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. He told them about his father's death, about struggling alone, about the advertisement for a wife, about Hale's first visit and the threats that followed. Hale's lawyers tried to shake him. "Isn't it true you were failing even before Mr. Hale made his offer? That your ranch was already in trouble?" "The ranch had problems," Mason admitted, "but we were managing, until Hale started burning buildings and stealing cattle." "You have no proof Mr. Hale did those things." "I have his own words. At dinner. Admitting everything." "Allegedly admitting, according to you and your wife, two people with every reason to lie." "We're not lying," Mason said firmly, "and you know it." The exchange went on, but Mason held his ground. When he finally stepped down, he looked exhausted but relieved. Then it was Lillian's turn. She walked to the stand on shaking legs, placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, the whole truth. Rodriguez started gentle. Background questions. How she came to Cedar Ridge, how she met Mason. Then harder questions. Tell the court about the dinner at Victor Hale's ranch. Lillian did. Recited every detail she remembered. The threats, the admissions, the casual cruelty. She watched the jury, saw some of them frowning. "And he threatened you specifically," Rodriguez said. "Can you repeat what he said?" "He said it would be a shame if something happened to me. That I was alone on the ranch while Mason was working. That accidents could happen." Lillian's voice was steady. "It wasn't subtle. He wanted me to know he could hurt me any time he wanted." "Objection," Hale's lawyer called. "Speculation about intent." "Overruled," the judge said. "The witness can describe her perception of the threat." When Rodriguez finished, Hale's lead lawyer stood. He was tall, well-dressed, with a smile that reminded Lillian of a snake. "Mrs. Cole, or should I say Miss Graves, you've only been married a few months, correct?" "Yes." "Under unusual circumstances, a mail order arrangement." "Yes." "And before that, you were in Boston, working at a factory." Lillian's stomach dropped. Here it came. "Yes." "But you left Boston rather suddenly. In fact, you fled, didn't you?" "I left, yes." "Because you assaulted someone. A man named Fletcher, broke his nose, injured his hand." The courtroom murmured. Lillian felt eyes on her, judgment settling like weight. "I defended myself," she said clearly. "He attacked me. I fought back." "That's your version. Mr. Fletcher's version is quite different. He says you were the aggressor, that you attacked him without cause. He's lying. Or you are. After all, you fled before the matter could be investigated. That suggests guilt, doesn't it? It suggests I knew he had money and connections, and I had neither. That I wouldn't get a fair hearing." The lawyer smiled. "Or it suggests you're someone with a history of violence. Someone willing to make false accusations when it suits you." "Objection," Rodriguez called. "Counsel is testifying. Sustained. Stay to questions, counselor." But the damage was done. Lillian could see it in the jury's faces. Doubt. Suspicion. "Mrs. Cole, isn't it true that you and your husband stand to benefit significantly if Mr. Hale is convicted? That with him out of the way, you'd face no competition for land, for water rights? We don't want his land. We want him to stop attacking ours." Convenient. Attack a wealthy man's reputation, get him arrested, Eliminate your competition, all while playing the victim. I am a victim, Lillian said. Heat rose in her voice. He burned our barn, stole our cattle, shot me. She gestured to her shoulder. The scar's still fresh. You want to see it? Objection. Withdrawn. The lawyer turned away. No further questions. Lillian left the stand feeling raw, exposed. Mason caught her hand as she sat down, squeezed tight. You did good, he whispered. But she didn't feel good. She felt like she'd been torn apart and put back together wrong. The trial continued for 2 more days. More witnesses, more evidence. Hale's lawyers fought every point, but the weight of testimony kept building. Hale himself never took the stand. His lawyers advised against it, probably because he couldn't deny anything without committing perjury. Finally, closing arguments. Rodriguez was passionate, methodical. The evidence is overwhelming. Mr. Hale orchestrated a campaign of terror to steal land and crush anyone who opposed him. He threatened, he burned, he stole. And when that wasn't enough, he sent men to kill. The Coles survived by luck and courage. Others weren't so fortunate. Justice demands a conviction. Hale's lawyer painted a different picture. This is a vendetta. Bitter ranchers who couldn't compete blaming their failures on a successful man. My client made legitimate business offers. If people chose violence instead of negotiation, that's not his fault. The prosecution hasn't proven anything beyond hearsay and coincidence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. Mason and Lillian waited in the hotel, unable to eat, unable to rest. When word came that there was a verdict, they rushed back to the courthouse. The foreman stood. On the charge of conspiracy to commit arson, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit theft, guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit assault, guilty. On the charge of attempted murder, guilty. Lillian felt Mason's hand tighten around hers. Around them, people were reacting, cheers from the ranchers, shocked silence from Hale's supporters. Hale's face had gone white. For the first time, he looked scared. The judge sentenced him to 20 years in territorial prison. You used wealth and power to terrorize honest people. You ordered violence and destruction without remorse. The law may have been slow to reach you, but it has reached you now. As they led Hale away in chains, he looked back once. His eyes found Lillian's. No smile this time, just hatred. She met his gaze and didn't look away. Outside the courthouse, people swarmed them. Handshakes, congratulations, tears. Thomas was there. Dutch, Sarah, dozens of others who'd made the journey to Santa Fe. You did it, Thomas said, gripping Mason's shoulder. You actually did it. We did it, Mason corrected. All of us. But as they rode back to the hotel, exhaustion crashed over both of them. The trial was over. Hale was convicted. They'd won. So why didn't it feel like celebration? I keep waiting for the relief, Lillian said that night. They were in bed, too tired to sleep. But I just feel empty. I know what you mean. Mason pulled her closer. We spent so long fighting, it's like we don't know how to do anything else. What do we do now? We go home. We rebuild. We live. He kissed her forehead. We figure out what comes after survival. Together, Lillian said. Together, Mason agreed. And finally, for the first time in months, Lillian felt something like peace. The journey back to Cedar Ridge took 2 days, and Lillian spent most of it watching the landscape change from civilized streets to open frontier. With each mile, she felt the weight of the trial lifting, replaced by something she couldn't quite name. Not relief exactly. More like the strange lightness that comes after you've been bracing for impact and the blow never lands. Mason was quiet beside her, lost in his own thoughts. They'd shared a room in Santa Fe, shared a bed, but hadn't talked much about what came next. It was like they'd used up all their words in the courtroom and had none left for each other. You think it's really over? Lillian asked as the ranch came into view on the second evening. Mason considered the question. Hale's locked up, his men scattered. So, yeah, I think the fighting's over. That's not what I asked. He looked at her then, really looked. No, I guess it's not. He pulled the horse to a stop just short of the property line. You want to know if we're okay, if we survived this intact. Did we? Mason was quiet for a long moment. I don't know yet. I think we need to figure out who we are when we're not running scared or planning the next fight. Lillian nodded. It was an honest answer, at least. The ranch looked different in the fading light, smaller somehow, more fragile. The rebuilt barn stood solid, but the scorch marks were still visible on the ground, reminders of what they'd endured. They settled the horse and went inside. The house felt empty, cold. Lillian lit the stove while Mason brought in their bags. They moved around each other like strangers, careful not to touch, not to intrude. "I'll make dinner," Lillian said. "I can help." "It's fine. I've got it." Mason stood there awkwardly for another moment, then retreated to check the property. Lillian watched him go and felt something twist in her chest. They'd been through hell together, had declared love in the middle of chaos, and now they couldn't even figure out how to share a kitchen. She made beans and cornbread, simple, filling, nothing that required much thought. When Mason came back, they ate in silence. The quiet felt wrong after months of constant tension, constant conversation about strategy and survival. "Sarah stopped by while we were gone," Mason said finally. "Left a note. Said she's organizing a gathering next week. Celebration, I guess, for everyone who helped." "That's nice of her." "Yeah." More silence. Lillian pushed beans around her plate. "We're being weird, she said. Mason looked up, surprised. "What?" "We're being weird. Awkward. Like we don't know each other." Lillian set down her fork. "What's happening?" Mason rubbed his face. "I don't know. I thought, after the trial, after everything, I thought it'd be easier. But I keep waiting for the next crisis, and there isn't one. And I don't know what to do with that. So we're just going to avoid each other? Pretend we didn't say what we said? No, that's not..." Mason stood, paced to the window. "I meant what I said, about loving you. But I said it when you were bleeding, and I was terrified, and everything was falling apart. Now things are stable, and I don't know if what?" Lillian felt cold creeping into her stomach. "If you still mean it? If you still want it?" Mason turned to face her. "You came here for work, for safety. Not for me. And now Hale's gone, you're not in danger anymore. You don't need me for protection." Lillian stood slowly. "You think I stayed because I needed protection?" "Didn't you?" "No, you idiot." Anger flared, hot and clarifying. "I stayed because I chose to. Because even when everything was terrible and scary and we were getting shot at, I wanted to be here. With you. Not because you protected me, because we protected each other." Mason stared at her. "You want to know if I still want this?" Lillian crossed to him. "Yes. I want this. I want you. I want to rebuild this ranch and figure out what comes next and probably fight about stupid things like normal people do. I want boring and stable and a life that isn't about survival." She poked his chest. "But I want it with you, so stop assuming I'm going to leave the second things get comfortable." Something in Mason's expression cracked. "I'm scared," he said quietly. "My whole life, everyone I've loved has left or died. My mother, my father. And you almost, when you got shot, when I thought I was losing you. But you didn't lose me. I'm right here. For how long?" The question came out raw. "How long before you realize this life is hard and thankless and you'd be better off somewhere else?" Lillian grabbed his face between her hands, forced him to look at her. "I am not your mother. I am not your father. I am not going to die or leave or disappear. I am standing right here, choosing you, choosing this, choosing us. And you need to decide if you're going to believe that or spend the rest of your life waiting for me to prove you wrong." Mason's hands came up to cover hers. "I want to believe it." "Then believe it." Lillian's voice softened. "I'm not going anywhere, Mason. You're stuck with me." He pulled her close then, buried his face in her hair. She felt him shaking, relief or fear or something between the two. She held on tight and let him. "I love you," he said into her hair. "I'm sorry I'm bad at this. At trusting. At everything. You're not bad at everything, you're just scared. That's allowed." Lillian pulled back enough to see his face. "But we're going to have to work on the communication thing, because I can't read your mind and I won't spend my life guessing what you're thinking." "Fair enough." Mason managed a small smile. "What are you thinking right now?" That I'm tired, that my shoulder hurts, and that I really want to go to bed and not sleep alone. I can work with that. They went to bed together, not for passion or romance, but for comfort, for the simple reassurance of another body close by. Lillian curled into Mason's side, felt his arm wrap around her, and finally felt something like home. The next week was strange. Good strange, but strange nonetheless. They fell into a rhythm that wasn't dictated by crisis or fear. Wake up, work, eat, talk, sleep. Simple things. Normal things. Lillian found herself doing tasks she'd never had time for before, mending clothes properly instead of quick patches, organizing the kitchen, even attempting to bake bread. It didn't turn out great, but Mason ate it without complaint. It's a little dense, she admitted, watching him chew. It's fine, just chewy. You're a terrible liar. Mason grinned. Yeah, I am. He took another bite. But I appreciate the effort. They worked on the ranch together, but the urgency was gone. If a fence needed mending, it could wait until tomorrow. If cattle wandered, they'd come back. The constant pressure to stay ahead of disaster had lifted, and Lillian was learning to exist without it. It wasn't easy. She caught herself waiting for something bad to happen, tensing at unexpected sounds. Years of survival instinct didn't just disappear. One afternoon, a rider approached and Lillian's hand went automatically to the rifle by the door. Mason caught her wrist gently. It's just Thomas, he said. Lillian looked, sure enough, Thomas on his familiar horse waving. She laughed shakily. Old habits. They'll fade. Give it time. Thomas brought news about the gathering Sarah was planning. She's got half the valley coming, wants to do it right. Music, food, the whole thing. Celebration and thank you rolled into one. We don't need thanks, Mason said. Maybe not. But people need to give it anyway. Let them. Thomas looked between them. You two look better. Less like you're about to jump out of your skin. We're working on it, Lillian said. Good. You've earned some peace, both of you. After Thomas left, Mason turned to Lillian. You want to go? To the gathering? Do you? Asked you first. Lillian thought about it. A week ago, the idea of being around that many people, being the center of attention, would have made her anxious. But now, yeah, I think I do. Then we'll go. The gathering was held at Thomas's ranch on a Saturday. By the time Mason and Lillian arrived, dozens of people were already there, ranchers and their families, townspeople from Cedar Ridge, even some folks from neighboring valleys who'd heard what happened. Sarah swooped in immediately, hugging Lillian carefully. How's the shoulder? Healed, mostly. Still gets sore when it rains. That'll probably stick around, battle scars usually do. Sarah smiled. Come on, there's people who want to meet you. The next hour was a blur of introductions and handshakes, and people thanking them for standing up to hail. Lillian found it overwhelming. She'd never been good with attention, never wanted to be seen as a hero. But these people weren't seeing a hero. They were seeing someone who'd been as scared as they were and had fought anyway. That somehow made it bearable. A woman around Lillian's age approached, shy and hesitant. Mrs. Cole, I'm Emma Walker. You helped save my family's ranch. I didn't. You did. When you rode out to stop those rustlers, when you testified, you showed us it was possible to fight back. My father was ready to sell, to give up. But you changed his mind. Lillian didn't know what to say to that. I did what needed doing. That's more than most people would have done. Emma squeezed her hand. Thank you. Similar conversations happened throughout the evening. Each one felt surreal. Lillian had never thought of herself as brave. She'd just been too stubborn to quit. But maybe that was what bravery was. Not the absence of fear, but refusing to let fear make your decisions. Mason found her later, handed her a cup of something that smelled like whiskey. You okay? Overwhelmed, but okay. Lillian sipped the drink, felt it burn. People keep thanking me. You earned it. We earned it. This wasn't just me. No, but you were the one who rode out alone against 4 armed men. People remember that kind of crazy. Mason's tone was light, but his eyes were serious. You scared the hell out of me that day. I scared myself. Lillian looked around at the gathered people, laughing, eating, celebrating. But I'd do it again if I had to. I know you would. That's what terrifies me. Mason pulled her close. But it's also why I love you. The gathering went late into the night. There was music. Someone had a fiddle, someone else a guitar. People danced, including Mason and Lillian, though neither of them were particularly good at it. We're terrible, Lillian said, laughing as Mason stepped on her foot for the third time. Absolutely awful, he agreed. But he was smiling, really smiling, in a way Lillian hadn't seen before. Open. Unguarded. Dutch appeared, slightly drunk, and clapped Mason on the shoulder. You know what Hale's property is going up for auction next month? Territorial government seizing it to pay his legal fees. Good, Mason said. Some of us are thinking, we pool our money, buy it together, turn it into common grazing land. No one person owns it. Everyone benefits. Mason looked interested. That could work. Prevent someone else from trying Hale's tactics. Exactly. Dutch looked at Lillian. Your wife's smart ideas are catching on. Cooperation over competition. After he wandered off, Lillian leaned into Mason. That's a good plan. Sharing the land. It is, though I never would have thought of it before you showed up. Mason kissed her forehead. You changed how I think about things, about people, about what's possible. You gave me a reason to stay and fight. We changed each other. They danced a while longer, then found a quiet spot away from the crowd. The stars were out, brilliant and endless. Lillian leaned against Mason and felt, for the first time since arriving in Cedar Ridge, truly settled. I've been thinking, Mason said, about the future, about what we want to build. And? I want kids, someday. Not right away. We've got enough on our plate, but eventually. He hesitated. Is that something you want? Lillian had thought about it in abstract terms before, but never seriously. The idea of bringing a child into the world she'd known, violent, uncertain, had seemed cruel. But now, looking at the stars, thinking about the ranch and the community and the peace they'd fought for, it felt different. Yeah, she said. Someday, when we're ready, when the ranch is solid and we're not wondering if we'll survive the month. So maybe next year? Lillian laughed. Maybe. They stayed until the gathering wound down, until people started heading home and the fires burned low. The ride back to their ranch was quiet, comfortable. No tension, no fear. Just two people who'd survived something terrible together and were figuring out how to live after. Over the following weeks, life continued its strange new normal. The nightmares came less frequently. Lillian's shoulder healed to the point where she barely noticed it unless the weather changed. They worked the ranch, made plans for improvements they'd never had time to consider before. One morning, Lillian woke to find Mason already up, standing on the porch watching the sunrise. She joined him, coffee in hand. What are you thinking about? She asked. Nothing, everything. Mason accepted the coffee she offered. Just realizing this is my life now. Not fighting, not surviving, just living. Feels weird, doesn't it? Yeah, good weird, but weird. He looked at her. You ever regret it, answering that advertisement? Lillian thought about Boston, the boarding house, the factory, the grinding hopelessness. Then thought about here, the work, the fear, the blood and fire and pain. But also Mason, the ranch, the community, the sense of having built something worth keeping. No, she said honestly, not even for a second. A month after the trial, word came that Hale had died in prison, infection from a fight with another inmate. Some people celebrated, others felt cheated that he hadn't served his full sentence. Lillian felt nothing, no relief, no satisfaction. He'd been removed from their lives already. His death didn't change anything. I thought I'd feel different, Mason said when they heard. Glad, maybe, or vindicated. Me too, but he's just gone, and we're still here. That's enough. They were working on expanding the barn when Dutch rode up with news. The auction's next week. We've got commitments from 8 ranches to pool money. Should be enough to outbid anyone else. How much do you need from us? Mason asked. Dutch named a figure. It was steep, but manageable. Mason looked at Lillian. It's our money too, she said. Decide together. They talked it through that evening. The investment was significant, would set back some of their other plans. But the collective ownership of Hale's former land would benefit everyone, prevent future tyrants from gaining the same foothold. "We do it," Mason said. "We're part of this community now. We invest in its future." Lillian agreed. The auction went as planned. The collective outbid a few outside investors and claimed the property. They celebrated at Thomas's place again, smaller gathering this time, just the contributing ranches. "To cooperation, Os," Thomas said, raising his glass. "And to the people who showed us it was possible." They drank to that. Summer gave way to fall. The heat broke, replaced by cooler days and cold nights. Lillian learned to love this time of year, the way the light changed, the smell of coming rain, the relief after months of drought. She and Mason settled into patterns. Morning coffee on the porch, work until midday, lunch together, usually something simple, more work, dinner, evening hours talking or reading or just sitting quiet. It wasn't exciting, it wasn't dramatic, it was just life. And Lillian found she liked it more than she'd ever expected. One evening, she asked Mason about his parents. He rarely talked about them, but she wanted to know, wanted to understand where he came from. "My mother was tough," he said after a long pause. "Had to be. This life isn't easy for anyone, but especially not for women. She worked as hard as my father, never complained, but I think she was lonely. My father wasn't good with words, with feelings. He showed love through work, through providing, but he never said it." "Is that why you're the same way?" Lillian asked gently. "Probably. It's what I knew." Mason looked at her. "But you've taught me it's not enough. That people need to hear things, not just see them proven through action." "Both matter," Lillian said. "Words and action. You're getting better at both." "I'm trying." They sat quiet for a while. Then Mason asked, "What about your parents?" Lillian had known the question would come eventually. "My mother died when I was 8. Consumption. My father, he tried, but he was a drunk who couldn't hold work. We moved constantly, always one step ahead of debts. He died when I was 15. After that, I was on my own. That's young to be alone. I survived. That's what matters." Lillian drew a breath. The boarding house, the factory, that was all I could manage. I thought that was all I deserved. A small, hard life. Nothing more. And now? Now I know I was wrong. I deserve more. We both do. She took his hand. We deserve this. Peace. Partnership. A future we choose instead of one forced on us. Mason brought her hand to his lips, kissed her scarred knuckles. "Yeah, we do." Winter came. The first snow fell in early December, light and pretty. Mason taught Lillian how to winterize the ranch, securing buildings, storing food, preparing for weeks when travel might be impossible. They were snowed in for 3 days in January, cut off from neighbors, from town, from everyone. Just the two of them and the quiet. Lillian had worried she'd feel trapped, but instead she felt safe, cocooned. They spent those days talking more than they ever had, about everything and nothing, dreams, fears, stupid stories from childhood. On the third night, Mason said, "Marry me again." Lillian blinked. "We're already married." "I know, but the first time was just practical, legal. Two strangers making an arrangement." He took her hands. "I want to do it right this time, in front of people we care about. Make promises we actually mean." "We meant them the first time." "Did we?" "I meant the legal contract, but I didn't mean—" He struggled for words. "I didn't mean forever. I didn't mean partnership. I didn't mean love, but I mean them now." Lillian felt her eyes sting. "You want a real wedding. I want you to have a real wedding, the kind women dream about, not a rushed ceremony in a musty office." "I never dreamed about weddings," Lillian said honestly, "but I like the idea, doing it right, choosing each other publicly." "Spring," Mason said. "When things thaw and green up. We'll do it then." "Spring," Lillian agreed. They planned it through the winter. Nothing fancy, neither of them wanted that. But something meaningful. Sarah offered to help, got far too excited about details. "You need a dress," she insisted. I have dresses. A nice dress. Something special. Sarah was already making plans. I can sew. I'll make you something. Lillian tried to protest, but Sarah wouldn't hear it. Let me do this, please. You've given this valley hope. Let me give you a dress. The fabric Sarah chose was simple, dark blue, practical enough to wear again, but nicer than anything Lillian owned. The design was modest but flattering. When Lillian tried it on for the first time, she barely recognized herself. You look beautiful, Sarah said. Lillian touched the fabric, felt the quality of the stitching. I don't know how to thank you. You already have, just by being who you are. March brought mud and early flowers. The wedding was set for April, when things would be properly green. Thomas offered his ranch for the ceremony. More space than yours, easier for people to gather. They accepted gratefully. The week before the wedding, Lillian woke to nausea. She barely made it outside before being sick. Mason found her leaning against the porch rail, pale and shaking. You all right? Fine, just stomach's off. It happened again the next day, and the next. By the fourth day, Sarah took one look at her and knew. You're pregnant. Lillian stared. I can't be. We've been careful. Careful isn't perfect. Sarah's expression was knowing. When was your last monthly? Lillian thought back, realized with shock it had been 6 weeks, maybe more. She'd been so busy she hadn't noticed. Oh, she said faintly. Sarah squeezed her shoulder. Congratulations. Lillian sat down heavily. Pregnant. A baby. She and Mason had talked about it as someday, not now. They'd just found stability. Were still figuring themselves out. But as the shock faded, something else emerged. Not fear, not panic. Something almost like joy. She told Mason that evening, watched him process it. Shock, then uncertainty, then a slow smile that transformed his whole face. We're having a baby, he said wonderingly. We're having a baby, Lillian confirmed. He pulled her close, careful and gentle. Are you okay with this? I know we said not yet. I'm okay with it. Scared, but okay. She looked up at him. We can do this, right? Yeah, we can do this. Mason's hand found her still flat stomach. We've survived everything else. We can handle a baby. They told the others at the wedding. It wasn't planned. Sarah let it slip, and then everyone knew. The celebration doubled, became wedding and baby announcement rolled into one. The ceremony itself was simple. The same reverend from their first wedding, but this time surrounded by friends. This time meaning every word. Do you, Mason Cole, take Lillian to be your wife? To stand beside her, support her, love her through whatever comes? I do. Mason's voice was steady, his eyes on Lillian. Do you, Lillian Cole, take Mason to be your husband? To stand beside him, support him, love him through whatever comes? I do. And she meant it with everything she had. They kissed, not their first, but somehow different, sweeter, a promise and a celebration together. The gathering afterward was bigger than the previous ones. People brought food, music, gifts. Lillian danced with Mason, with Thomas, with Dutch. Let herself be happy in a way she'd never quite managed before. Late in the evening, she found herself alone for a moment, watching the celebration. A year ago, she'd been in Boston with nothing. 6 months ago, she'd been bleeding on her kitchen floor. Now she was married, really married, to a man she loved, pregnant with their child, surrounded by people who'd become family. Sarah joined her. What are you thinking? That I didn't know life could be like this. That I could be this happy. Well, you earned it, both of you. Sarah looked at the gathering. You changed this valley, you know, not just by stopping hail, by showing people what's possible when they stand together. I didn't do anything special, just refused to quit. That's exactly what made it special. Sarah smiled. Most people quit. They accept bad situations because fighting seems too hard. But you fought, and you won. Mason appeared, offered his hand. Dance with me? Lillian took it. Let him pull her into the music, into the moment. They moved together, and she thought about the train platform where they'd met. How uncertain everything had been. How she'd nearly turned back a dozen times. Thank you, she said. Mason looked down at her. For what? For being honest in that advertisement. For not promising things you couldn't deliver. For being exactly who you said you were. A lonely rancher who needed help? A good man who deserved better than he thought he did. Lillian rested her head against his chest. We both did. Summer arrived with heat and long days. Lillian's pregnancy progressed. Morning sickness faded, replaced by energy and a restlessness that drove her to work harder than Mason thought wise. You're supposed to be resting, he said, finding her mending fence in the midday heat. I'm pregnant, not fragile. There's a difference. But she let him take over the harder tasks, accepted his protectiveness for what it was. Love expressed through action. They prepared for the baby. Built a cradle from wood Mason had been saving. Sarah sewed blankets and tiny clothes. The community rallied, bringing gifts and advice. It's going to be hard, Emma Walker warned. Babies are exhausting, but wonderful too. Lillian believed her. In August, Lillian woke to pain. Not the sharp pain of injury, but deep cramping that rolled through her in waves. Mason rode for Sarah while Lillian tried to breathe through contractions. Labor lasted 14 hours. Long, painful, terrifying. Mason stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, letting her grip tight enough to hurt. Sarah coached her through it. You've survived worse. You can do this. And she did. Finally, screaming and sweating and certain she was going to die, Lillian pushed their daughter into the world. The baby cried immediately, strong, healthy lungs. Sarah cleaned her, wrapped her, placed her in Lillian's arms. Mason stared at them both, eyes wet. She's perfect. She wasn't really tiny and red and wrinkled, but she was theirs. What do we name her? Lillian asked. They'd discussed names but never decided. Mason touched the baby's tiny hand. Grace, for what we were given. A second chance. Grace, Lillian repeated. It felt right. The first weeks with Grace were chaos. Sleepless nights, constant feeding, the terror that they were doing everything wrong. But they figured it out together, learned her rhythms, became parents. Lillian watched Mason with their daughter, gentle and terrified in equal measure, and loved him more than she thought possible. One night, Grace finally sleeping for more than an hour straight, they sat on the porch in exhausted silence. We did it, Mason said. Did what? Everything. Survived hail, built a life, made a family. He looked at the ranch, repaired, improved, solid. A year ago, I was alone and hopeless. Now I have you, Grace, a future. We have a future, Lillian corrected. Together. Fall arrived again, completing the circle. Lillian stood on the porch with Grace in her arms, watching storm clouds gather on the horizon. The first rain in months was coming. Mason joined them, wrapped his arm around Lillian's shoulders. We should get inside before it hits. In a minute. Lillian wanted to watch. Wanted to feel the moment. The rain came sudden and hard, drenching everything. Grace fussed at the noise, and they retreated inside. But Lillian stood at the window, watching water pour from the sky. What are you thinking? Mason asked, rocking Grace. That I used to hate the rain. In Boston, it just made everything worse, cold, wet, miserable. But here, she watched it soak into the thirsty earth. Here, it means life, growth. It means we'll make it through another season. We will, Mason said. Not a question. A certainty. Lillian turned from the window, looked at her husband and daughter, at the life they'd built from nothing, and she understood something she'd never grasped before. Strength wasn't about never being afraid or hurt or uncertain. It was about facing those things and choosing to keep going anyway. She'd come to Cedar Ridge expecting nothing, hoping for survival at best. Instead, she'd found partnership, community, love. She'd found herself. The rain continued outside, washing everything clean. Inside, Grace settled against Mason's chest, finally sleeping. Lillian joined them on the couch, created a small circle of warmth against the storm. This was her life now, not the one she'd planned, not the one she'd dreamed about. Something better, something real. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Years later, when Grace was old enough to ask questions, Lillian would tell her about the train platform, about arriving scared and uncertain, about the barn burning and the bullets and the trial, but also about community, about standing up when it mattered, about finding love in unexpected places. "Were you brave, Mama?" Grace would ask, and Lillian would answer honestly. "I was terrified, but I did what needed doing anyway. That's all bravery is, being scared and doing it anyway." Grace would absorb this, file it away, and someday, when she faced her own challenges, she'd remember. Would understand that strength came not from never falling, but from getting back up. Not from never being afraid, but from refusing to let fear make the decisions. But that was years away. For now, Lillian sat with her family, listened to the rain, and let herself simply be. Happy, grateful. Home. The storm raged outside, but they were safe within, together. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything.